Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And sometimes making yourself as successful as possible actually does entail working for someone else. And so we're going to be talking with a great expert today on interview tips, which, I'll be honest, I don't think I've interviewed for a job in probably 25 years. But we're still going to learn a lot. And as I was reading through your information, I thought, this pertains to all situations. Are we interviewing to work with another client? Are we interviewing a client? I mean, all these various things. So fabulous tips. So please join me in welcoming Chris Delaney to our program today. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Debs. I'm really excited to be here. You got so much energy. I'm liking the monkey in the background. I'm liking the pictures, and I'm loving your
great?
Amazing smile.
We have so much fun. And it is, you got to have a lot of energy. Now, I'll admit it's morning here, and so I still have a lot of energy. And I know it's afternoon where you are, which is where?
Well, Manchester in the UK. So yes, it's afternoon here.
Cool. I love it. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Chris Delaney left school with no qualifications after struggling in education due to being dyslexic and having a terrible lisp. He is now a hypnotherapist and an interview coach at Employment King, which he founded. He is also the author of What is Your Interview Identity? So again, Chris, welcome.
Fantastic. It sounds like a great journey, that, doesn't it? Left school,
it
dyslexic,
does.
and now we've got a book out.
I know. I always love it when we write our own bios, obviously, but then somehow when somebody else reads them, it's like, woohoo.
Yeah, you kind of like, what the heck, is that me?
I know. Who the heck are they talking about? And that actually is, some of the things that happens during an interview is we get so caught up in who we are that we forget to brag about ourselves and things like that. But one of the things I want to always find out about my guests is how they got to where they are. I mean, I briefly mentioned it, but tell us a little bit more about how you discovered that this really is your passion in life.
Well, I am a dyslexic loser. This is the title I gave myself when I was a kid because I had to go to a specialist school. I got took out of mainstream school, into a specialist school, back into mainstream school. And I couldn't read and write that well. The dyslexic is when you see a word, but all the letters kind of jump about and miss about, and you can't really read it. So I left school with no qualifications, and I ended up working in low skill jobs, absolutely hating them. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is a horrible career path I'm going to go down. I'm never going to be successful, never going to succeed. But I know that I have a passion for helping people. So what I'll do, instead of getting paid for that passion, because there's no way I'm going to university, I'll just go and volunteer. So I used to take adults rock climbing and hiking, and it's charity. I used to work with youth groups and scout groups, and I started learning all these skills and techniques to help people be more confident. My first job was £1 an hour. Can you believe that, Deb? £1 an hour. This is how old I am before minimum wage. So £1 an hour. So, I've been working in low skill jobs for a couple of years. I'm on £1.50 now. I'm doing quite well for myself. But I get this great opportunity. I get the opportunity to learn how to drive a forklift truck. And I'm a hands-on kinesthetic learner. So I got onto that truck and I was driving through the warehouse, through the chicane, lifted up the pallets, putting them down. I was fantastic. I was the king of forklift truck driving.
You love that
forklift
truck.
I loved that forklift truck. It was so good. But a couple of other people on the course was really struggling. And they're struggling because of their nerves and anxiety. We always get scared of trying something new. And the instructor said to me, Chris, you're going to pass the test. And I turned around to the other people and said, I think you're going to fail. this guy was not a motivational speaker.
Yeah, not really.
So they got really nervous, even more anxious. And I went over and I kind of gave them this technique that I used to use with the adults that we took rock climbing when they're just kind of scared of like going up these big heights. And it's just a visualization technique. And I did it with these colleagues of mine. And they got in a truck, massively confident, drove through the chicane, lifted up the pallet, put it down, passed the test.
Yay!
Anyway, a year later, the instructor comes down, sees me in my workplace, and he's like, do you remember who I am? And I was like, yeah, you're the guy who taught me to drive the forklift truck. He goes, well, no, I'm the managing director of the organization.
Oh!
I know. So I was like, oh, okay. The reason I came down that day was because the instructor rang in ill and we wanted to make sure you guys got your forklift truck license. And I always remember that you had loads of colleagues who was really nervous and scared, and you went over and you whispered something to them. And we call you the magic whisperer because you whispered something to them. They became instantly confident and then passed the test. Every time we have a monthly meeting, we talk about you. Anyway, Chris, we now have an opportunity to take on extra staff, and we want to hire you. And I was like, wow, this
more
is
than a pound
amazing.
and a half.
Well, that's it. I'll be on £1.60 now. But then he said to me, he went, because I was so excited when he said that. And anyway, the course to be a forklift truck instructor is £3,000. Wow. So I was like, yes, £1.60 an hour, got £30 in the bank. I'm eating beans and toast for my tea. That's how poor I am at this moment in time. And I thought it's one of those cons in it. Give me £3,000, I do the course, but then there's no job at the end of it. And he read all this on my face and went, no. I know what you're thinking. We're going to pay for that course. We're going to mentor you. We're going to support you. We're going to give you this opportunity because we see something special in you. And I think what it is, Debs, I think success is often about having a passion, but taking those opportunities as well. And that's kind of my journey, my story.
I love it. You know, and the thing was, you had somebody who supported you, which I think is a big part of it too, is, you know, the second we start having those little battles in our head with saying you're not good enough, you can't do this, why are you even trying, to have someone else, and it really doesn't matter what level they are. I mean, clearly he was a very high level, but it's having that outside support system a lot of times that is the difference between, you know, success and failure.
We all suffer from imposter syndrome. We always think that we're not as good as we actually are. And sometimes you need a mentor or a coach or someone just to kind of ask you those questions to get you to reflect on what you do well. So if I was your mentor, Deb, I might sort of say like, what is it you do well in these podcasts? How do you get your guests excited to talk? And those questions kind of get you to think, oh, what is it that I actually do? And that's what you need. You need this time to have a self-reflect or a mentor and coach to kind of ask you those powerful questions. So you go, I am good at that, actually. That is something I'm successful at. This is how I'm growing throughout my career.
Right. You know, and we've talked a lot about imposter syndrome because women especially have it, especially at a higher level management. And it's so interesting that men have it too, because, you know, our perception is men are, you know, their egos, they're just, you know, but as you said, you know, you have just as many challenges. And I think many times what happens with the imposter syndrome is when we were young, somebody thought they were protecting us by kind of starting us down this journey by saying, you know, something like, you know, Chris, because you're dyslexic, you probably shouldn't think about going to college. Or for a girl, you know, you're a girl, so you shouldn't think about a higher math, or, you know, all these various things. And they really were trying to protect us. But over time, it became that little voice of, you're not good enough. Don't ever bother.
Anxiety is all about self-protection, actually, isn't it? We get anxious about situations because we don't want to put ourselves in an environment where we might be hurt physically or mentally. So we often say to ourselves, oh, you can't do that and you can't do this. We build up that feeling of anxiety because fundamentally we want to belong to a group, to a tribe, to a team, don't we? That's what humans are. We're social animals. And one of the things we need to belong to a group, tribe or team is to fit in. And when you put yourself in front of a job interviewer, or you put yourself on stage, or you state an opinion that you have, you're then putting yourself in front of your group and your tribe up for judgment. And if that judgment is a negative one, that affects who we are. Right. So our brain does all that very quickly and goes, just don't say anything. Just don't try these new opportunities. Don't go for that job because you might get judged. Yeah, don't bother. Where successful people, you know, they're more kind of egocentric and actually jump on opportunities and try new things. And they're more externally aware rather than internal thoughts. They're more about how can I have an impact on you or the organization or the team. And that's the difference, really. You need to kind of turn down that self-doubt and start taking these opportunities that present every single day of your life.
Right. And of course, an interview is one of the absolute most stressful things that anybody can go through, even if they, kind of know, hey, I'm the shoe in for it. It's you're waiting for them to say, you don't meet this criteria, or, and we read so much into it, right? They pause at the wrong time and we're thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong? So, you've written several books, and the latest one is called Interview Identity, and it's really talking about how to get through this interview process. And I wanted to talk about this because, we've got this darn pandemic that's going on, and everybody's jobs are coming, they're going, all sorts of things. And so I think it's important for us to be talking about these right now. So, how, first of all, is there a bias that people kind of come into? Is there an unconscious bias that happens in interviews?
It's kind of like the first filter is unconscious bias. So the employer walks down the stairs, or even if you kind of pitch into like, a team of investors or whoever it is, these communication techniques are the same in so many different situations. But the employee comes downstairs, as soon as they see you in that instant moment, that millisecond, they make an opinion about you based on your height, your gender, your age, your ethnicity, 100 million different pieces of data and information. And it's all filtered through their values, their beliefs, their past experiences, to create an instant judgment. And this goes back to our ancestors, the hunter and gatherers.
Right. Are they going to hurt us or help us?
Yeah, that's it. And that's instantaneously. And it's just an instant judgment. So in a job interview, it's kind of like a likability factor. I kind of like this person or I dislike this person. And that's the first filter. But in actual fact, it starts prior to the job interview. So there's an unconscious bias when the interviewer reads your application. So imagine on that application form, you talk about how you can do this amazing thing that will earn loads of money for their organization. And you think, oh, this person seems ideal for the job. So they create the halo effect. I want this person to
you've
do
got
well.
an advantage before you start.
Yeah, and it's the same with the horns effect. So imagine for an internal vacancy where two managers are just chatting and saying, this afternoon I'm going to be interviewing Chris Delaney. And they're like, oh, Chris, is he going for that job? He doesn't seem suitable at all. And then the employer thinks, maybe not then. And it's very powerful, this, because it's the initial judgment. And what the research shows us, because the book's based on like 100 different research papers, is if you kind of like someone or dislike someone, if you want someone to do well or you want someone to fail, you will then search for evidence to back up your own belief. And your attitude at a subconscious level will change in the interview to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I didn't think this person's going to do too well. So then I just like not bothered. I'm a bit of a cold interview. I don't ask encouraging questions.
You
so
ask
my
them,
behavior,
you ask them questions kind of designed to make them fail.
Yeah, and often it's at the subconscious level. Then the applicant then acts out a character now, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I didn't think you was going to do well. You're acting rubbish. I knew that was going to be true.
Right. And it really is. It's that true first impression. Whether it's what do they find online, or driving up, all those various things. I remember one time, I think I was probably back in college, where one of the young women had a Gucci purse, very expensive bag. Now, I don't remember if she got it at a secondhand store, if it was a gift or whatever, but it was not something she would walk in and buy. I mean, she just couldn't afford that. But they actually told her, don't take that purse into your interview. Now, there's a whole big thing with don't take a purse in anyway, because you could spill it and yada, yada, yada. But, and we were all like, well, why? It's Gucci. and they said, because there's expectations that come with that. First of all, is she very wealthy and working for fun? Is she going to expect lots? Is she going to put on airs? I mean, because we do have impressions of somebody who's very wealthy, and all these things. And, they said, now, obviously you don't take in something tattered, but, but that's also why I tell people, go to where you're going to be interviewed before you go in, like several days before, and check out what people are wearing, so that you're dressing appropriately. You don't want to go in the business suit if everybody's in very casual clothes, and same thing. You don't want to go in very casual if the people are in suits, and because you want to show them that you fit in right at the very start.
There's an infinity bias, so we're drawn to people who are similar to us. So if you wear the Gucci bag and you see someone with that bag, you can't say, "Oh, we got something in common." So that likability factor increases. That can even be you going to the same university, living in the same town, or even having the same name. It is any commonality with the interviewer. They have a natural affinity bias towards you, which is all about that likability factor at the very beginning of the job interview.
Right. Which is, one of the things technology has really helped with is you can look up so much information about the company, about even the people, you can look up their social media profiles, all these various things. And like you said, I mean, if you walk in and say, "Oh my gosh, we went to the same university," or "we went to a competing university," or, things like that, and we're always told, look around the room. And, if they've got a picture of, their kids playing soccer, comment on that, it's that whole likability factor, as you said, is just so important.
And it's so easy on social media because people talk about their hobbies and their interests and, what they're passionate about all the time. And when you get took from the reception up to the interview room, there's often like a bit of small talk. Did you get here okay? How are you doing? What if it's a Monday, what did you do at your weekend? What have you been doing this week? So you can use those opportunities to bring up those commonalities, like, "Oh, I'm a rock climber," and they do the interview like, "Oh, I'm also a rock climber," and you have this chat, and then everyone's smiling, and you go into the interview room, and the rest of the interview panel are waiting for you, but they see the interviewer smiling and chatting to you, the candidate, and then you get introduced. So it just starts this likability factor that can then spread across the interview panel.
Right. So, the trick though is to be authentic about that, and never ever lie. I mean, because you'll be found out on that. But how do you, because I know that you are also a hypnotherapist, which I love. And so how do you, how can you come across and be truly authentic when you're saying, "Oh my gosh, hey, I see that your kids play soccer," and things like that, so that it's not just coming across as I'm saying this because I should say it.
All you got to do is be completely immersed in being interested in other people. When you're interested in other people, you'll ask them questions anyway. So imagine the interviewer's into rock climbing and kayaking as an example, but you're not into that, so you can't have any affinity bias.
Right.
You've got different names, they went to different schools, you got nothing in common with this person. It doesn't really matter because all you need to do is get the likability factor high, because that affects the whole job interview. And one way to get the likability factor high is just ask people questions. People absolutely love it when you show interest in them. When someone starts talking about something they're passionate and then you're showing interest and asking more questions, they get excited about it. And you can have 20 minutes of a job interview with someone talking about their passion, and then they go, "Oh, sorry, we need to start the recruitment process now.
I guess we should be doing the interview."
Yeah. Well, like before today, before we went live, we were chatting about the monkey, and we were chatting about the cats and all that sort of stuff, and we was having like a really good laugh. And that's just that was all natural, but that's what helps create likability, and then we have a great radio interview now.
Right. Well, and it kind of calms you down, because like we said, going for an interview is incredibly stressful, and so kind of having that little chit chat before gives you a chance to get your breathing settled, to kind of do several things, and clearly there's a lot of just basic things for an interview, don't be late, all of those various things. But yeah, if you can take, a couple minutes and just calm the situation down, that's going to help you give much better answers.
It's one of the most powerful techniques is controlling your emotions, because when you're in a panic mode, your heart rate beats a lot faster, and you often breathe from the top of your chest.
Right.
And then that
women's voices go up.
I meant like everyone's voice can be, "Oh, talk like this." It's so funny, isn't it? But what that does, that body emotional reaction, it sends a signal to your brain saying that you're in fight or flight. So you stop digesting your food, your blood goes to your to your vital organs, your muscles kind of tense up. That's why people tremble in job interviews, because your muscles are tensing up.
Right.
When you're in rest and digest mode, your natural waking state, you're just breathing from the bottom of your stomach, your heart beats the normal rate, and you're more relaxed. You can think about your answers and past examples. And one of the easiest ways to do that is rhythmic breathing. So you breathe in through your nose for 4 long seconds. You then hold it for 4 seconds and then force that breath out. So you kind of breathe out loud for another 4 seconds and just repeat that cycle. And that just sends the relaxation signals, calming down your heart rate. So it's at a normal rate. And then you just breathe much more naturally, sending oxygen to the brain so you can recall all your amazing answers that you prepared the night before.
Right. And that's part of why you want to get there early, because you get there, you get settled, and then you can calm yourself, and because there are all sorts of things. I mean, you're always worried you're going to be late. There might be traffic, all sorts of things. So take that time. And even if you think you're calm, still do it.
Definitely. And then that kind of like, once you kind of think about the job interview process itself. And there's 3 rules for a successful job interview. We kind of talk about this in the interview identity book. So the first rule is so important. This rule is to identify the job criteria, know what the job role is about, the main business as usual duties, so you can predict the interview questions, understand the company culture, the leadership styles, the management styles, the vision of the organization, because most companies ask you about the culture of the organization these days. Rule number 2, you've actually mentioned this early on, Deb. You need to be a self-promoter. You need to brag about yourself, especially in England. We're so reserved in England. We hate saying nice things about ourselves. For years, I never told anyone my kind of like journey from being dyslexic to, having books and stuff like that. But I tell everyone now, because it's like, just promote the things that you're good at. And then the third one is something you do fantastic, Deb. You need to communicate with confidence. So listeners, when you listen to Deb speak, she doesn't talk in a monotone voice. Her volume is up and down. She's got different emotions in the voice. She's then she smiles when she talks. She's got gestures. This is what we mean when you communicate with confidence. Not just about the content of what you're talking about. It's the way you speak, the way you deliver that message. Deb excites me when I hear her speak, and I'm getting excited just from the energy she has compared to someone who just talks a little bit like this and wants to send me to sleep. I'm a hypnotherapist. I talk at one level when I want people to go into a trance.
Because you're supposed to be soothing and calming. I mean, that is.
Yeah, but in a job interview, you need to be engaging and energizing, don't you? You need to get people to think there's something about this person that I like. They've got the skills, they've got the knowledge, they've got the experience, but also they've got this likability factor. And it's very important that.
I didn't know why this just flashed in my head when you were saying you were a hypnotherapist. I can imagine you going for an interview and hypnotizing them and then saying, "You want to hire me? You want to."
Yes.
That's the way to do it.
That's perfect. So when we finish this call, you're writing me like a check for £2,000. You're thinking, why am I giving Chris £2,000 to be on my show? I just click my fingers.
Yep. But there actually is some truth to that too. Is maybe things are getting a little wound up, so you need to calm it back down. And so think about that, because we do, when we're nervous, when we're excited, when we're passionate, our blood pressure rises, all of those various things that you just said. And so we might not be coming across as the best possible candidate. And one of the things that we always have to watch is, what is the interviewer? What is their body language? All of those various things. So kind of talk to us a little bit about that. How can they affect our behavior?
So people with low self-esteem focus on the interview all the time. So they analyzing what the interviewer is doing. So the eyes are scrunched up, or they're not asking, more detailed questions, or the notes aren't that long. So they must hate me. This is what low self-esteem people do. They're looking for evidence to say that they're going to be terrible for this job or in this interviewer. Where if you're confident, you don't do that. What you're thinking about is, how can I have impact on the employer? How can I talk about something that they can use in their organization? So you have an internal focus in your head, what's the interviewer doing? Or you have an external focus, how can I impact the person I'm speaking to in front of me? And that's what you got to move your focus from. You got to move it from out your head, where you're questioning your own ability, your imposter syndrome, and get focused on, how can I give the interviewer some knowledge, advice, and my expertise? How can I tell them something that they don't know?
And of course, one of the biggest things is to practice, practice with another person, practice in the mirror, and if possible, record it, because we never realize that we've got these weird tics and things like that until we see it recorded and we're like, oh my gosh, or hear it recorded. I've been doing this a very long time, and I still, when I listen to myself, I'm like, ugh.
Yes.
but yeah, practice those things. And that will obviously help you calm down. I was working with a young woman one time, and I taught it at Metro State in Denver. And we were practicing interviews, and these were teams of kids. Now, Metro is one of those interesting universities where you have 18-year-olds and you have 68-year-olds. And I love that because there's so much knowledge and learning. I mean, all sorts of things like that. And so it's very cool. But we had everybody was in groups of 3, and they would practice their interviews. Then they were to give them in front of the program or in front of the class. And I was random CEO wandering through to interrupt their interview, and so I come in with stupid questions and things like that. And we had this one young woman, and she was fairly young, and both the other people that she was working with were older gentlemen, but they'd gotten along really well. They'd done several projects together. And she starts, so she was the interviewee. She gets about 2 minutes into it, and you could just feel the tension and everything going up in her. And it was things they practiced, all these various things. And she looks at me and she says, "I'm going to throw up." And I thought, uh-oh. And so, I moved a trash can closer to her, but I immediately said, "No, you're not. Calm down." And, and so she just kind of, and then of course she said, "I need to start over." I said, "We can't, these are timed exercises. If everyone only has a certain period of time." But I told her, so, afterwards I said, please come see me after class. And she did. And one of the things that I told her is something that I noticed that you are doing in your LinkedIn profile. I had her go to Toastmasters. And I said, that's a great way for you to get comfortable speaking in public. And speaking in public can be in front of 10,000 people or one. Sometimes it's harder to talk in front of that one person. So what are some other tips that you have for people who, even if you think you're really good at it, let's be honest, everybody can always do better.
Practice definitely creates perfection. The more you practice something, the more it becomes embedded into your subconscious. You have the muscle memory, and you can just do anything with lots of practice. Toastmasters and any public speaking group is so good because it teaches you not just to speak in front of 1 or 10, 15 or 100 people, but it teaches you how to structure a speech, which can then be used in a job interview to structure your interview answer as well. It also teaches you rhetoric devices, how to summarize, how to get your message across rather than just talking lots and waffling. One of the things we used to do in Toastmasters was have someone count people's filler words. Because like you said, when you're nervous, when you're anxious, you talk with filler words, ahs, so's, likes all the time. And people aren't aware of how many they use. So we used to always have like a tally chart and get people to do that. One of the other techniques though that I think is really good to learn to public speak is doing improv classes. So an improv class, you get put on the stage to give you, a flower and a plastic water pistol and a scene, and then you have to just talk about it or act something out in that moment. That is the best way to learn how to answer random curveball interview questions that you cannot prepare for.
Oh yeah, because improv is just totally off the wall.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such a great skill to learn. So you want to practice speaking in public because that's really important. But you also really want to be practicing how you structure your interview answers, because you want your answers to have impact. When we talk about like the interview identity, it's about it's a chart where on one axis is your level of perceived knowledge and experience, and then the other axis is your level of confidence, and then you get like one of 16 interview identities. But this often comes over in how you answer that first interview question. If you structure that in a way where you're self-promoting your skills, your experience, your unique selling point, giving detailed answers with data-specific information, people are going to be like, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. That's a great idea. I've never thought about that before. That's how you score high in the job interview. So yeah, practice speaking, go to workshops, go to improv classes, get an interview coach or whatever. The more you practice, the better you'll become.
Right. And again, this isn't just for interviewing. I, before the pandemic, attended a lot of in-person networking, and now they're just, online. And invariably, especially if it's, a group of people and it's a networking event, it's, Chris, give your 30-second spiel, and that's for many people, their brain immediately goes, what?
Yeah.
They can practice it. They can do all these things. The worst thing, and I've seen this happen before, and my heart just breaks for them, is they're absolutely terrified and they're reading it. And I mean, like, they've got their paper in front of them and they're saying, "Hi, my name is Deb Creer and I do," and of course that comes across so bad. It would be better just to say, "Hi, I'm Deb Creer. Please come up to me afterwards and I'm more than happy to tell you a little bit about what I do." Because, when you have to read it, the thought process is, well, you're not prepared, you can't do this, things like that. But, it does come with practice. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Now, the problem comes that you don't want it to be rote, where it sounds too rehearsed, right? Because we've all seen that too, where somebody stands up and they go, yada, 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 yada. And they sit down and you're like, what was your name again?
Yeah. Robotic interview answers is how I call it, where it's just too over practiced, too over rehearsed. You kind of need that balance. One of the things you want to do when you're doing these 30-second elevator pitches, when you're in job interviews, in any sort of communication, especially when you're being asked questions or having to present, an idea or something, you want to break it down to that key. What is the key message? What's the one thing you really want to get across? And you need that to be in a sentence. So I know someone in a job interview might say something like, I have 10 years experience of turning around companies on the brink of bankruptcy and making them into multi-million-pound organizations. It's something where it tells you what it is, but it's intriguing and inspirational at the same time. If I'm in a networking event, I sometimes say something along the lines of, I'm a hypnotherapist who can help you get rid of your lifelong phobia in just 60 minutes. So again, I tell everyone what it is in one sentence, but make it a little bit intriguing. And you kind of want that, the basis of your job interview answer, your pitch, or any communication. What's that one thing you're trying to get across to them? And then build the communication, the answer around that.
Right. Yeah, because you want the next thing to be for them to say, tell me how you do it. Tell me why, all of those things.
Yeah, because a real good job interview, when you're doing well in a job interview, because an interviewer's got to ask you about 8 questions. In a structured interview, they ask you about 8 questions and it's got to score each question.
Right. And those were probably listed somewhere, so you can prepare for them.
Definitely. The whole thing about the identify the job criteria, rule number 1 of successful job interview. You can go off and you can Google your job role and job profile. So engineer job profile, podcast host job profile, or whatever. And it comes up with a list of duties. All those duties are going to be your interview questions. Go on to LinkedIn, find someone who's worked for that organization and say, what questions were you asked in that interview? You can do that sort of stuff. And there's just loads of ways to find the interview questions. So the more you can predict the interview questions, the more you can shape your answer to it matches that job criteria. They literally tick off that you have these skills, qualities, and talents to get like a score. The scoring system is often 1 to 4, so you get like a 2 or 3 for that. But when you can give examples, when you can say how this skill will help you in your organization, when you communicate it with confidence, you start getting a format because they're just impressed with your whole package.
Right. So now what do you do if it's going badly? I mean, you can tell, maybe they've sat back in their chair, maybe, you can read the body language and you just know. I mean, it could be that you also thought, nah, don't want to work here, I don't care. But what if it is something that you still want to do and the interview is going badly? How can you turn that around?
So you kind of want to try and identify, and it's hardest in the moment. It's easy on reflection, but you kind of want to try and identify what it is that's gone wrong. So generally it's 2 things. One is your communication style. So you're a bit nervous. So your answers are short and snappy, full of words, and you're saying it in a boring way. And you can see the interviewer falling to sleep. And if you're interviewed just before dinner or before the end of the day, it's often the worst time.
Right. Oh, because everybody's sleepy.
Everyone's sleepy, aren't they? Even you're sleepy as the applicant. So if it's something the way you're communicating, you just want to be a bit louder and a bit more energetic, depending on the interview question. But often
kind of wake them up, right?
Yeah, wake them up. Yeah, like shake the table maybe or something. Or say something intriguing which gets them interested. One of the main reasons though is they don't believe you're suitable for that role. So you've got a poor job interview identity, or you said something that they don't agree with, or they got an unbiased opinion about you. So as an example, you might get an employer say, oh, I can see you worked at X organization. Isn't everyone lazy over there? So
Oh,
the associate, yeah. So this is one
mhm,
of my clients told me this a
mhm,
couple of years ago. So the associated a poor organization to the
mhm,
applicant, and this happens all the time because
mhm.
this is what happens when you're
Right.
ageist, racist, or sexism.
Mhm,
It's the same
mhm,
thing. I group you into this negative
mhm,
group. So all you need to do is reframe it. So if they say something like, isn't everyone lazy at organization? Say, yes, they are. That's why I want to apply for a job here with you,
mhm.
because I know you value work
Right.
ethic, you got really good, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm,
and talk about the reason why you're
mhm,
getting away from that negative
mhm.
thing into the positive for
Right.
their
And make it a
organization.
really short thing about the negative thing, though. Don't dump
Yeah,
on them.
yeah, yeah. It's about how you present data.
Mhm,
As an example, if you go to a supermarket and you see two yogurt brands, one
mhm,
will say this yogurt is 80% fat free. The other
mhm.
brand will say this yogurt contains 20% fat. The
Right.
same
It's the
data,
same
just
thing.
presented different. Yeah. And
Mhm,
that's what you need to learn in job
mhm,
interviews, is presenting the best version of yourself.
mhm,
Don't talk about business as usual.
mhm,
What you might say something like, "Tell me about your average day." Well, I get in at 9 o'clock. You have a cup of tea, and then I
mhm,
sit down and chat to my colleagues. I'll check my.
mhm,
You don't want to talk about that
mhm.
stuff. You want to say,
No,
"Well,
no.
2 weeks ago, I came
Mhm,
into work and this
mhm,
big problem happened."
mhm,
Explain the situation in one sentence,
mhm,
and then talk about the steps you took, your
mhm,
creative thought process, your
mhm,
creative problem solving techniques, how you planned out the tasks you were going to
mhm,
do, how you delegated stuff, how you took a leadership role, and then the outcome to that situation,
mhm,
how you were successful, or you made
mhm,
money, or you overcome that negative
mhm,
thing that was happening. Talk about those specific situations where you was a star,
mhm,
you was fantastic, you made something
mhm.
happen.
Right. And there are those generic questions that you almost always get. What was the biggest challenge you ever faced? What is your biggest strength? What is your biggest weakness? I always hate that. What is your
Yeah.
biggest weakness? Like you're going to say, I'm a lazy schlub, or and so that is where you want to turn it into a positive, to say, what is your biggest weakness? Well, I found it challenging in the past to focus. So here is what I have done to get past, or don't even answer it.
Mm,
I mean, it's
yeah.
okay to just, skim right over top of that and say, here are things that I really love to do. Because right, you're not going to say, well, my biggest weakness is, yeah, no.
Yeah. It's so true, that, because one of the things you kind of learn if you go to lots of job interviews, the
Mm-hmm,
reason everyone's scared of interviews, by the way, is
mm-hmm,
because it's so rare we go to them. We don't go to a job interview every
mm-hmm.
day, every week, every month. It's
Right.
once every
Yeah.
3 years, isn't
Mm-hmm,
it? So people fear the unknown.
mm-hmm,
Um, so when you go to lots of job interviews, though, you start learning the technique of understanding why they're asking particular questions.
mm-hmm,
So when you ask the weakness question,
mm-hmm.
the employer doesn't really want to know about your weaknesses. They want
No.
to know about that journey, like you said,
Mm-hmm,
Deb, about,
mm-hmm,
this is what I've done to improve, this is
mm-hmm,
what I've done to
mm-hmm,
develop. That's what they're interested in. Are
mm-hmm,
you someone who just does the same thing and makes the same mistakes? Or do you reflect? Do you
mm-hmm,
create a plan of action?
mm-hmm,
Do you learn, develop, and
mm-hmm,
improve? And now what is the current
mm-hmm.
situation you're in? So when they
Right.
ask you a question that you're thinking, why are they asking this?
Mm-hmm,
Kind of think, what skill, quality, or experience
mm-hmm,
do they want me to talk about?
mm-hmm. Right. And like a good response to a weakness thing could be, I didn't know how to do X. So here is what I have done to fix that. And let's be honest, it doesn't have to be your biggest weakness. It can just be anything that then you can use to show how you have made things better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what it's all about. It's about showing development, showing improving. Employers now, it's not just about someone having an academic qualification or
Mm-hmm,
10 years experience. They want it's all about someone's work ethic, their
mm-hmm,
personality, what values they hold, how
mm-hmm,
they're motivated, if they're work well in that management style. A lot
mm-hmm,
of companies now are actually moving into strength-based job interview
mm-hmm,
questions, where they kind of ask about your preferences. So do you prefer to
mm-hmm,
work on your own or in a team, or tell me about a good day?
mm-hmm,
Because they're really trying to understand you as a person, as
mm-hmm,
well as your experience and your
mm-hmm,
qualifications. So yeah, you want to be talking about like your thought process, as
mm-hmm,
well as the actions that you took.
mm-hmm. Right. And we learn from even the worst things. This happened to me, oh gosh, maybe 30 years ago. I mean, this was a long time ago. I went for an interview and it was a panel. And we've done that before, right? Where it's not just one person, there's multiple. This was hideous. There were, I believe, 8 of them. And
Wow.
it was a kind of a darker room. I was way up in front and they were just lined up in front of me. And they took turns asking questions. So it was this person, 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 and you just kind of felt like this little person on this little swivel going back and forth. I decided like 5 minutes into it, I had no desire to work for that company. It was a great organization, but I thought if this is how they handle the interview, I really have no desire to work there. So of course, what happened was I relaxed and I just, so then of course, what happened is I get called back and I really did think about it. I thought, it's just my first impression was exactly what we were talking about at the very start. I don't want to work there. And so I turned them down. I said, I'm sorry, but, thank you very much, because you never know who's going to talk to somebody else. Right. And I said, thank you very much, but I'm going in a different direction, or just something like that. And they were really surprised and they pressed me. And I finally said, I have to tell you, that was the most horrible interview I have ever done. I said that whole panel thing with question. And I was not allowed to ask questions. That was the other thing, I distinctly remember, I said, well, what about, or something. And they said, you can ask questions if you're called back for a second interview. And I thought,
yes. Do you know what? This is such a good story, Deb, because this is what people forget. It's a two-way process. Mm-hmm. On average, 300 people apply for every advertised job role, and then they interview 6.
Right.
So they want you. You're in an interview. There's something
If
that
you've
they
made
want
it to
about
the
you.
interview, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, you're so good. So now, also they want to see if you're, the right fit. The interviewer's goal for a job interview is to predict the job performance of each candidate and then give the best one the job offer. Your goal for that job interview is one is to explain your skills, qualities, and unique selling point. But really, it's for you to decide if you want to work for that particular company.
Right. Yeah, you're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you.
And it's so good that you turn that down, because actually most people, when they're offered a job, even when they know they don't like that organization, will say yes because they're scared to say no. Because I won't get a job somewhere else. I'll just take this one.
Kind of like going on that first date.
To your confidence.
Yeah, if you didn't like it on the first date, you're probably not going to like it on the second date.
That's it. But we always go to the second one just in case. But it's not, sometimes you need to do that. But often, though, that gut reaction that you have gives you an indication if you're going to be suitable for that company or not.
Yeah, because let's face it, even, unless they are somebody who is interviewing people all the time, they might be just as nervous as you are. So, there could be some things that just kind of throw off. And so it really does kind of take that second chat sometimes to see what's going on.
I think that's really important as well, Des, because if you get interview for a high paid position, you normally get like HR teams coming in, or external recruiters coming in, and they're often trained in unconscious bias in the structured job interview process. And, it's more of a fair, confident recruitment session. Often though, for like low for middle skilled jobs, you normally interviewed by your manager, the person who's going to be your manager in the future. They often haven't had any training. They're often very nervous because they only recruit once every 3 to 5 years. So they're just as anxious and scared as you. So
they're so scared they're going to ask one of those questions that get you in trouble, right?
Yeah. And they'll have imposter. Everyone's got a little bit of imposter syndrome. So they're thinking, if I ask about this thing and then you ask me a question, I don't know the answer. I look like an idiot and I'm your potential manager.
You're not going to want to work for me.
That's it. So they're just as nervous as you are. And I think when you know that relaxes you. You're nervous. I'm nervous. Everyone's nervous. Let's just have a chat. Let's just have a conversation.
Yeah. It comes back to what we said at the very start. Chat a little bit, break the ice, and I mean, you can even say things like, oh my gosh, traffic was heavy, all these various things. And then you can talk about it. But yeah, kind of, because they're probably just as nervous as you are. Obviously a little technical glitch, folks, but what we were talking about was, you talk in your book about 16 interview identities. So what is an interview identity?
So we talked about unconscious bias. We talked about the interview's behavior and how that affects the behavior, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you get asked that first job interview question, the interview creates a snap judgment about your suitability for that role. And that's based on your perceived level of knowledge and experience and your level of confidence in the job interview. So if you're talking about like industry models, industry theories, giving examples, giving data-driven interview answers, to thinking this person's knowledgeable, they've got set to experience, I can see role, they dealt with that problem before. And as long as you talk with confidence as well, so giving long descriptive answers, using mixed language, using emotional words, having different tonality, thinking about the case, you'll get a strong interview identity. Where
if you've got loads of confidence, you can talk the talk, but you can't really, reference the job criteria. You've got no examples that are relevant to the job role you're applying for. They'll think, well, this person's confident, but they haven't really got the skills and abilities for that job role. And some people, when they're highly confident, pretend they have. So they sometimes will use white lies and stuff, so you get seen as more deceitful. Or if you've got loads of knowledge and experience, you've been doing this job for 20 years, you're an expert in that, job role. We've got the halo effect. We know you're going to be really
right.
But you can't communicate that. You're going to be like, do you want this job? Are you a little bit bored? So the identities are based on how you're perceived in the job interview, not how you would do the job in the real world. So you might be dead confident in your current role, but in a job interview, you don't communicate your competencies confidently. You'll get a job interview identity.
I love it. And what we're talking about a lot is how this is not a one-way street. Your behavior and how you do things can actually influence how the interview goes. We talked about, if it's going badly, how do you turn it around? How are some other ways that you can kind of change the direction that things are going in?
We talked a little bit about this already, about conversations. One of the best things to do is when you're asked an interview question, which are normally quite generic, unless you're asking technical questions, is you then ask the interviewer a specific question. So as an example, they say, give me time when you were successful. You can then say to them, do you want an example of being successful in the job or out of the job environment? So it doesn't really matter what they say. What you're doing is creating a conversation. If they ask you about, how would you implement this system? Talk about different systems that but ask them first. Ask them if they're aware of this system or they're aware of this process. I teach people when they talk about time management to use the time management matrix model. And one of the first things you do before explaining the model is say to the interviewer, so I often use the time management matrix model. Is that something you're aware of? And then they got to answer that question. Creates a bit of a conversation, but it also allows you time to think about the answer you're going to deliver.
Right. And companies usually like it when you've done your research about them in advance. And so to be able to say, hey, I know that you use XYZ technology and I'm very comfortable with that. And that's where I have found LinkedIn has been very invaluable for many of the people that I work with, because I tell them, contact people who work there or work, currently or formerly. And just say, hey, I've got an interview with ABC company. I'm hoping you can give me some tips. They're either going to ignore you or they're going to say yes, or they're going to say no. I mean, there's not a lot of options. And, what I really love are finding the people who used to work there and saying, can you tell me about why you're no longer there? Because, and now, you're going to get a variety of answers, clearly, but it does kind of help you do some things. But companies really like it when and as we said, it's so easy anymore to really be researching companies. One of the greatest examples that I had when I was working with someone was, she reached out to somebody on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm interviewing for X position. Now she was going to move from Denver to Cincinnati. Sorry, Cincinnati. But, and she found someone who used to work there and they said, it's actually a really great company, but it is struggling financially. So you need to keep that in mind. So, now who knows, that person could have just been disgruntled. Their buddy might've been applying for the job. So she did further research and she discovered that, yes, they were struggling. So she used that in her interview. She was actually offered the position and she told him, she said, now I understand you've been going through some financial difficulties. So, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But more importantly, if I'm going to move all the way out here, I need some information. And they guaranteed her that if she lost, if the company went under, they would move her back to Denver, and so, but and you don't want to be, you certainly don't want to be Superman whooshing in to fix things, but you can say, hey, I've seen that you've got these, I'd like to discuss them more, positives and negatives.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It kind of comes back to like the infinity bias, but instead of it being about a person that you're both in a hobby, it's about the organization. And people are passionate about the organization, aren't they? For some people, the job, their career, their organization, their identity. So if you've done the research, if you took time to research, one, it just shows something about your character, doesn't it?
Right.
You're researching, you're understanding. You're also confident enough to ask me questions about it as well. And like you said, if it's something to do with like the technology they use, your answers are specific, aren't they? Because it's about that piece of technology, just not the technology as the example. So the more specific your answers are, the more relevant they are to the organization, the more likely they're going to score high on the interview scorecard.
Right. And you can also do that in the follow-up that you send to them. I always tell people that's a great place, because you still should send that note, and make it, now I don't know, email. I mean, the nice thing about email is it's immediate. So it's probably okay. I was in the old school of you still wrote the note, but that's a great way to remind them about something, to tell them something you forgot. When I was interviewing people for the producer of this podcast, the woman who I work with, who, they were all fabulous candidates, but the woman that I ended up working with, who we've been together now for, 3.5 years, she's been working for me. So clearly this worked out. But one of the things she did was in her follow-up, she made suggestions. Yeah. And she made them in a way that it wasn't, hey, you're doing this wrong. It's, hey, I noticed this. Have you ever thought about doing such and such? And I thought, initiative. I like that. And so that's a great way to be able to follow up with folks. Or even if it's just, hey, Chris, I know that you're following X soccer team. Did you see this great article about them?
Yeah, it's really, really good that, especially like say that they've got like a byproduct, so they're making something, they've got all this waste. You can research what that waste can be used for to then make profit, can't you? Or to reduce the cost of getting rid of that waste for them. It's all about added value. Remember before I said 6 people out of 300 apply for the job, get the interview when they apply for the job. So everyone's going to have a same level of experience, similar qualifications, probably a similar skill set. So why should I pay you 30, 100, 150 grand? What's different about you? And it's these little things that make you stand out. Don't they? Like, asking additional questions, the research, knowing about the organization, talking about the things that you can add, your unique selling point. You need to stand out in a job interview. You can't just give everyday answers.
Right. And same thing with if you're wanting to be a consultant for a company or everything, how are you setting yourself different? And for the most part, it's not money. It's not who is, it obviously depends on, some factors, but cheapest is not always the best. And in fact, companies know if we want good employees, we're going to have to pay them. I mean, that's really been a struggle here in the States because of the pandemic. Many folks can make more money staying home right now. And so what are the things that you bring that are going to set you apart, and we didn't even talk salary negotiation. I hate that part. That's the worst part of the whole job interview. But it is, how can you set yourself apart from that other handful of people that they brought in?
Yeah, definitely. Even like having like a side hustle that you can talk about as well. So you've got like a part-time thing going on, or, people often love people who volunteer because it shows like your work ethic. You're not going to work for 3 years. You've got poor work ethic. You're not a hard worker. Doing additional qualifications. So many organizations are into self-development, personal development, and they often ask that question, what have you been doing to develop your skills in this industry? So anything like that adds value, but really having something specific that's based on research about the organization really makes you stand out. And the way you present it as well, I keep talking about the level of confidence. The research shows, when they've done all the research papers, that if you're confident, you have more words per answer, you use mixed language, your filler words are a lot lower, and you have more self-promotion in there. People who lack confidence, for some reason, will disclose weaknesses when they're not prompted. So as an example, they'll say, tell me about a strength. And what they do is go, well, a strength. Well, I'm not very good at IT. I'm not very people. And then
they just panic, right?
Yeah, they're panicking. So what they're doing, they're kind of listing things. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. So I'll talk about the third thing, which I am good at. They finally find that good thing.
Right. But the interviewer just remembers the first 2 things.
Yeah, that's it. The other thing to remember as well with job interviews is the interviewer is analysing your answers against the criteria on the job interview scorecard and then giving a point. A lot of it will give points allocate the points at the end of the interview. So they make all the notes done at the end between the two interviewees, will allocate the points. Or some interviews do it at the end of the day. So it's very easy for an interview to forget some of the stuff that you said or to misinterpret what you said as well. So little techniques like summarizing your answer at the end of each answer reinforces the 3 things that you were talking about. At the end of the job interview, when you get asked questions, you can ask a couple of questions, and then when they say, do you get anything else to ask, summarize your skill set. You can kind of say, well, I think in the job interview when we talked about this skill, this quality, this unique selling point, I think I kind of covered everything there. And it's just another way to find them of who you are. And having like a voice like yours, Debs, where you're energetic, you're fun, you're engaging. I will always remember you because I'll be like, oh, Deb's the one with the monkey who's like energetic and really
She's
engaging.
that wacky redhead.
Yeah, like that's like little things make you just a bit more memorable in there. That's why humor's great in job interviews, you know, at appropriate situations.
Great. Well, oh my gosh, Chris, even with our little technical glitch, we are at the top of the hour. So please tell us how people find you and connect with you, and then of course about your book.
Yeah, so my website is employmentking.co.uk, and that's full of like loads of free resources for job.
Oh yes, tons of really great information. Very industry specific. I like that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I mean, my goal is to just help people. Like, you know, most of it's all free on there. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so people can contact me, ask me questions on LinkedIn. And then my book, What is Your Interview Identity, is on pre-release now. 1st of September is the official launch date on all the books store like Amazon. So yeah, you can pre-order that now. What is your interview identity?
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, this really has been fascinating, even though, like I said, I haven't interviewed in 25 years, and I hope I don't ever have to interview again. But, you know, it is nice, you know, as we said, these skills transfer with everything, you know, because you're always being interviewed. Maybe you're being interviewed as a volunteer, you know, all of these various things. And so it's great skills to have and to remember. So, you know, as I said, you know, I am Deb Creer. I've been having a fascinating discussion with Chris Delaney. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
The main thing in job interviews is to be a self-promoter. It doesn't matter if you fail in a job interview, because there's always another one coming up. In that job interview, it's talk about your skills, your qualities, and your unique selling point. I
love it. You know, and practice, folks. Don't be so confident that you think I can go in and I'm going to win this job, because that attitude comes across really quickly, right?
Definitely. I actually did some research on this. People who fail job interviews spend like 3 to 4 hours, 45 minutes practicing the job interview. Successful people spend at least 4 to 5 hours practicing the job interview.
I love it. I love it. Well, I am having, you know, such a great time. We'll have to have you on again because you've got such great information. Until then, as you mentioned, your website is employmentking.co.uk, because you are in the UK. I am Deb Creer. I've been having a fascinating discussion with Chris Delaney. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.